Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, The Automation Advantage: Compliance Without the Complexity. We're so glad that you could join us today. Before we get started, I want to take just a quick moment to introduce what we do here at Fierce Software. Fierce Software is a small, woman-owned, value-added reseller. We specialize in enterprise open source software, market-leading DevOps capabilities, and secure data platforms, all with a strong focus on supporting our public sector customers. Our unique reseller perspective helps us understand your goals and technology challenges, allowing us to offer solutions from our extensive portfolio instead of just a single vendor approach. We set ourselves apart in the reseller market by consistently delivering on our core capabilities. We act as an innovation broker, connecting our customers with leading technologies and the smartest people behind them. We serve as a license manager, simplifying procurement and reducing administrative overhead. We focus on customer success, providing access to vendor-trained and certified professional services. And we prioritize customer enablement, offering workshops, webinars like this one, and hands-on events to help our teams stay current and build real-world skills. For today's session, we're joined with the UiPath team, and they're going to be walking us through a practical roadmap from mandate to implementation using automation. If you have questions at any point, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on it, and we'll either address them during or after the presentation. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Pradeep.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jody. Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today. We're going to focus on a very practical question during the webinar today. How can health and human services agencies respond to growing policy, workload, and service delivery pressure without having to rip and replace the systems that they already depend on? For today, when we say HHS, we are primarily talking about the benefits side of health and human services programs, like SNAP, TANF, Medicaid, and related eligibility and assistance programs. So we'll start with the operational reality facing the state benefits programs today, such as rising caseload complexity, policy changes, staffing constraints, legacy systems, and expectation that services be faster and more accurate and more transparent. Then we look at the architecture that most HHS agencies today are operating in, which includes eligibility systems, document systems, portals, verification services. And then we'll talk about where those systems tend to break down. From there, we'll move into the new operating model, which is required by the recent federal and state level changes, including the need to handle more work with better controls and less burden. Then we'll introduce the solution, an automation and agentic layer that works across your existing systems rather than requiring agencies to replace them. After that, we'll show a live SNAP application processing demo end to end so that this becomes more tangible for you. And finally, we'll close with a blueprint, a practical path that agencies can use to move from discussion to compliance, modernization, and operationalizing this plan. So again, the goal today is not just theory. The goal is to leave you with a clear point of view on where automation fits, what to prioritize first, and how to get started. Before we talk about architecture or solution design, I want to ground us in what agencies are experiencing today. We conducted a survey with HHS agencies across the country, and the feedback was remarkably consistent. Right? This is not a single system problem, and it's not simply a staffing problem. It is a systemic operational crisis across states' benefits administration. The first issue agencies raised was processing delays. Many programs out there are seeing application timelines stretch to 60, 90, or even more days, even though federal expectations are often much shorter than that. What that really means is eligible families are waiting longer for critical support, and agency teams are constantly working from the behind. The second issue is what we call the manual work trap. Your caseworkers are highly trained professionals, but too much of their time is spent copying data, checking documents, rekeying information, and moving between systems. Instead of spending time helping people navigate complex eligibility decisions, they are forced into repetitive administrative work. Third, your agencies are also dealing with fragmented systems. A single case may require your caseworkers to check multiple eligibility platforms, document systems, identity tools, income verification sources, etc. These systems rarely talk to each other cleanly and consistently, so your caseworker now becomes the integration layer. And when you combine delays, manual work, and disconnected systems, the result is predictable, right? If your alerts go up, your manual transcription, inconsistent verification, missed information, they all create rework, they create audit exposure, and then they create a compliance risk. Finally, all of this lands in the middle of a budget crisis. Agencies are being asked to process more work, respond faster, meet new mandates, but without the budget or time to replace every single legacy system. So the key takeaway from the survey is this, right? Agencies do not need yet another new isolated tool. They need an operating layer that can work across their existing environment, reduce manual burden, improve accuracy, and help them respond to policy changes faster. And that is the lens we'll use for the rest of today's discussion. Now, if the survey shows us the operational crisis agencies are already facing, the changes in the Big Beautiful Bill legislation add another layer of urgency. The simple way to describe this is more work and less help. State Medicaid and SNAP programs are being asked to take on more determinations, more verifications, more redeterminations in a lot of cases, more reporting discipline, while administrative funding and operational capacity are moving in the opposite direction. On the left, you can see the sequence of pressure points in the next couple of years. First, your SNAP work rules are already in effect. That means agencies need to identify who is subject to requirements, verify exemptions, track compliance, and act when circumstances change. Second, Medicaid work requirements are expected by the end of 2026. That creates a very similar verification burden, but at Medicaid scale across eligibility renewals, notices, appeals, and coordination with external data sources. Third, starting in January 2027, agencies will also need to start managing 6-month redeterminations. That means your eligibility cycle compresses. Instead of touching many cases annually, agencies now have to revisit eligibility more frequently, which increases the workload across your caseworkers, call centers, mail rooms, and document intake portals. And finally, there is payment error penalty. By October 2029, states face a risk to federal match if your payment errors do not come up below the threshold of 6%. So this is not just about speed anymore, right? It is about speed, accuracy, documentation, and auditability all at the same time. And then the chart on the slide, it tells the story very visually. The red line is your administrative workload. It's going to start climbing sharply as each of these provisions I described take into effect. Your green line is the administrative funding, which is moving down. The space between these two lines is the gap that agencies have to close. And that gap cannot be closed by asking your caseworkers to work harder, right? They're already carrying the system. The question becomes, how do agencies absorb new policy requirements without breaking operations, without increasing errors, or without delaying benefits for eligible constituents? And that is where we believe automation becomes more than an efficiency tool. It becomes a compliance and capacity strategy for you. Now, let's look at why the current architecture struggles under this pressure. This is a very simplified view of how your benefits application flows through today. Your applicant can come through a self-service portal by mail or by PDF or through a walk-in office. From there, your application enters your case management, sometimes a modern web-based system based in Pega or Salesforce or any other modern technology. And from then your caseworker, and then your case moves to the caseworker and the rules engine. And this is where the strain really shows up. On paper, this process looks very linear, right? You apply, you manage the case, you review eligibility, then you make a determination, and you apply, approve, or deny the benefit. But in reality, the caseworker is constantly moving back and forth between these systems, data sources, documents, and verification tools. And at the bottom of the slide, you'll see examples of data exchanges that support SNAP and Medicaid eligibility. For SNAP, for example, agencies might need to pull information from IEVS data sources like SSA, unemployment, state wage data. For Medicaid, they might need to check the Federal Data Services Hub, income sources, immigration status, and other clearinghouses. The challenge is that much of this is still pulled, compared, and reconciled by hand. And fraud and integrity checks, they are not a single step at the end, right? Your duplicate checks, identity verification, income verification, they happen throughout the process. That just means more touches, more handoffs, more opportunities for delay, and more opportunities for error. This architecture worked when volumes were manageable and when policies were slower and when policy cycles were slower. But under the new legislation, the same architecture is being asked to handle more frequent redeterminations, more verification, more documentation. And that is why it breaks. Not because the people are failing, not because the court systems have no value. It simply breaks because the architecture depends on human beings to act as the connective tissue across these disconnected systems. So the key question is, how do we preserve the systems the agencies already have, but remove the manual burden that's sitting between them? And that is where UiPath comes in as an automation layer across the existing environment. Now that we've looked at where the current architecture breaks, this slide shows the new operating model. The important point is this: we are not asking agencies to replace their eligibility system, their mainframe, their MMIS, their SNAP databases, or their financial systems. A lot of that legacy modernization can happen in parallel, in tandem with this automation imperative. Those systems of record can remain in place. The flow is still the same. Your applications still come through the same portals, mail, PDFs, walk-in offices. Your cases still move into case management. Your case workers and rules engines still play a vital role. Your determinations still feed a downstream payment and financial systems. What really changes is what happens between those systems. UiPath adds an agentic automation overlay across the seams of this process. The places where humans today are copying, checking, validating, reconciling, and following up, that's where UiPath adds value. We'll talk about a couple of different pieces of this technology today. First, there's intelligent document processing, which reads your application, supporting documents, IDs, forms, and PDFs. That removes the need for your workers to manually transcribe information from every document. Second, verification orchestration. It pulls and reconciles the data sources that agencies already depend on: income, identity, unemployment, wage data. So instead of a caseworker manually logging into multiple systems, your automation gathers the evidence and prepares the case. Third, you have policy-aware agents that'll help you apply rules consistently. As policy changes, the operating model can adapt faster because the automation layer can be updated without waiting for a full core system modernization cycle. And then fourth, your human in the loop review, it still keeps your caseworker in control. The goal is to not remove the worker from the process. The goal is to move them out of repetitive data entry and into exception handling, judgment, and supporting your constituents. So instead of every case requiring the same level of manual effort, the system does routine work, surfaces confidence levels, flags exceptions, and routes only the cases that need human review. And that is the operating model that agencies need under HR1, the same existing flow, but automated at every step. And the upgrade is really practical, right? You still have the same staff, same systems of record, but with much higher throughput, stronger documentation, better accuracy, without waiting years for system replacement. So now let's get into a deep dive across each of these three solution patterns that I just described. The first place to start is the front door, right? Because this is where your manual work actually begins. Under the new operating requirements, agencies are not just processing new applications, they're also handling more frequent redeterminations, more verification events, more supporting documents, and more opportunities for cases to fall out of compliance. Think about the HR1 examples that we just discussed. For SNAP work rules, your agencies may need to start collecting and verifying employment information, exemptions, income documentation, student status, household composition, and change in circumstance. That means more documents entering the process, often through different channels. For Medicaid work requirements, the same challenge scales up. Agencies may receive pay stubs, employee letters, self-attestations even, tax documents, notices, scanned forms. Some of the documentation is going to be structured, some of it is going to be semi-structured, and some of it is going to be completely unstructured. And with 6-month redeterminations, this intake burden compounds, right? If an agency used to touch one case annually, now it has to do this twice as often. Every manual step becomes twice as expensive. Every document that has to be opened, read, classified, keyed in, and checked, it becomes a bottleneck. And UiPath document processing fixes the front door by taking that messy intake and turning it into usable data for you. First, the platform classifies the document so the system knows whether the document is an application, ID document, pay stub, bank statement, tax return, or other supporting evidence. Next, it'll digitize and extract the relevant information, turning your papers, scans, PDFs into structured data. Third, you can start applying highly accurate AI models to pull that information that actually matter for eligibility and verification. And fourth, humans only review the exceptions, only the cases where the confidence is low, where the information is missing, or policy judgment is needed. So when HR1 increases the number of verifications and redeterminations, agencies do not have to scale the manual intake burden one-on-one. The value hypothesis is pretty straightforward, right? Faster intake, higher extraction accuracy, less manual document work, and audit-ready digital records. And then the last point is really important, right? It's not just about speed. Under HR1, you also need to prove what was received, what was reviewed, what was verified, and why determination was made. Because the burden of proof is on the agency and not immediately on the applicant. And this is where intelligent document processing can create that digital evidence trail right from the very beginning. Now let's go one level deeper into verification. When it comes to verification, a common assumption is that the lookup against your verification source itself is a bottleneck. But for most agencies, that is not really the issue, right? Many lookups already happen today through an overnight batch process. Your SSA, IRS wage data, unemployment data, the federal data hub, and other sources. The real bottleneck is when this data does not line up, right? Let's just use the example on this slide. If an agency processes 100,000 applications a year and each case requires roughly 10 eligibility checks, that creates around 1 million check events annually. Now, some of these are already automated, like about 70% of them are already automated in like the most modern state-based systems. Your straightforward matches can clear without a caseworker, but a meaningful share still requires manual document review, cross-system comparison, or exception handling. And then there is your highest risk category, which is your exceptions. These are cases where a batch match conflicts with what the applicant reported, or where the income, identity, household, employment, or eligibility data does not reconcile cleanly. And that is exactly where the HR1 raises the stakes, right? With more frequent redeterminations, expanded work rule verification, tighter payment error consequences, your agencies cannot afford to let these exceptions pile up. Every unresolved exception in this 10% bucket, it can mean a delayed benefit, it can mean an improper payment, or it can mean a fair hearing risk or an audit finding. This is also where your fraud and integrity checks become operationally difficult. Duplicate participation, identity mismatch, income discrepancy, questionable documentation, etc. Today, much of that work lands directly on a caseworkers. And UiPath doesn't really replace your federal or state data sources. It makes them more continuous, more coordinated, and more actionable. Agentic orchestration targets 30% of the events that create most of the burden, right? That's your sweet spot. It can auto clear routine matches end to end. It can route those true exceptions into a managed queue. It can reconcile information across modern legacy systems, and it can create an audit trail for every action taken. And that really matters for error rate reduction because errors often come from missed checks, stale data, inconsistent manual review, and incomplete documentation. So under HR1, again, the goal is not simply to run more checks. The goal is to resolve more checks accurately, consistently, and in time before they become payment errors, fraud exposure, or compliance failures. Now, let's get into what we mean by agentic automation. Traditional automation, whether it is batch processes or any other script-based automation, your traditional automation technologies say, when this event happens, perform this step, right? That is useful, but it is not enough for the environment HHS agencies are moving into. For HR1, the challenge is not only executing tasks, the challenge is reaching the route outcome accurately, consistently, and with documentation. And that is the shift you are seeing on this slide from task automation to outcome-based automation. Your policy-aware agents start by perceiving context. Your agents can read case, they can read the application data, they can read the verification results. Your agents can read case history and prior actions. Your agents do not look at one field in isolation, they understand the full case context. Next, your agents start applying policy. For example, your agents can start evaluating eligibility rules, work requirements, exemptions, and start flagging missing documentation and conflicting information. Finally, your agents either act or escalate, right? If the case is routine and if the evidence is clear, it can auto clear the step. If something is missing, ambiguous, or high risk, it routes the case to a worker so that the evidence is already organized for the review. And this is important because in a traditional hard-coded rules engine, every policy change becomes an IT change. That means every rule change means requirements gathering, development, testing, deployment, and risk to legacy systems. While that is still important, while you still continue to do that in parallel, you can also start adding policy-aware agents where the agencies can just simply update the policy guidance, not the entire code base. Your agents can reason over this approved policy, cite the basis for its decision, and keep a human in the loop for edge cases. And that matters because HR1 will not be a one-time change. Your work requirement rules, your exemption categories, your document standards, and payment error controls, they'll continue to evolve. So the value is threefold again. Your agencies can auto-clear routine renewals and determinations. Second, every decision is audit ready with the policy basis and supporting evidence thoroughly captured. Third, the operating model can adapt faster as policy changes without waiting on a long IT rebuild. So the key message for agentic automation is this. Agentic automation is not replacing policy judgment. It is operationalizing your policy judgment safely, consistently, and at scale, while keeping your caseworkers fully in control where judgment is needed. Again, to summarize, we talked about three different types of solutions on patents. We talked about document processing. We talked about verification orchestration. And then we talked about agentic automation and policy-aware agents. Now, let's see this in action. Let's put this theory into practice, and then that'll help us make this more tangible. So I'm going to turn it over to Sohail, who's going to run us through a live demo now.
All right. Thank you, Pradeep. Hi, everyone. My name is Sohail Ghatnikar, and we'll be going through now a live demonstration. So before we get started, I just like to set the scene, right? We mentioned, and Pradeep mentioned a lot about caseworkers and, a lot of these things that are coming down, right? Certain work rules and work requirements as well, and also redeterminations, right? Put yourself in a caseworker's shoes for a second. Let's say we have a bunch of papers coming in. Normally, I may have this arrive at my desk and we can see an entire application that's filled out, right? And this is going to be, 10, 15 page form. We have 6 month redeterminations now, so I'll see this at least twice a year. It'll be a package, so I could have the driver's license as well, maybe a pay stub. I could even have, some policy documents that I may need to cross-reference to, right? And at the state level, we've decided that we need to get below a certain error rate so we don't have penalties. And so now I have to go and cross-reference this. Pradeep mentioned, we can have up to 10 different systems that I'm cross-referencing at once, and maybe even an Excel document that I'm referencing as well, right? So all of these things are coming to mind, and I'm realizing as a caseworker, right, I have to navigate all of this, and this is going to be 40% of my time just navigating one error that shows up and one manual process. So now, in contrast, I'm logged in as a caseworker to our caseworker dashboard, right? We'll be going through what it looks like to receive a SNAP benefits application. Here in line immediately, I can get a feel for my day, right? How many applications that I need to review and what this workload looks like. What are the tasks assigned to me and where we are within the process. As I scroll down here, I can see a bunch of different applications. I could sort them or start a new one. And if I dive into one, just as an example, all of that information that Pradeep mentioned we would have to extract, right, as that front door, that IDP, is extracted and available to me in line. As we go through the process, we'll see, some of that decisioning and some of those recommendations that happen as well. And within UiPath, it's all tracked, right? So I'll have all of that information at my fingertips. Similarly, instead of having to navigate to SharePoint or some other shared drive, I have that exact same application here. I have the ID document as well as the pay stub available to me in line. And one of the huge benefits of having this single pane of glass, right, is that let's say, something happens and I need to go out for a bit. Instead of just having all of that data and information rest, right, in our system or potentially on my specific local computer, I can even add in comments and communicate with my team so that they can pick this up right where it was left off. And ultimately, we can do what we need to do, which is provide all of that, all of those benefits to our users and our constituents as well, right? So let's look at what this looks like when we submit a process or an application here. I'm going to submit an application, and normally, right, we would probably connect to whatever a state's or whatever HHS system we may need. And here I'm actually going to use my own email, right? And I'm going to start this process. Obviously, this is a simulation, right? But we would normally just automatically ingest that and use automation or agents to pull in all of that data and update the various systems. As Pradeep mentioned, when we implement this in practice, it's not rip and replace, right? We are trying to meet you exactly where you're at, but give you that single pane of glass, I apologize, so that we have some of that orchestration across various applications. And now, as I see these come in here, we can actually look at these in process and what that looks like as we go through the ingestion process, right? We're going to take a look behind the curtain in a second, and you'll be able to see what development looks like, right? I'm not going to get too technical today, but I do want you to see what this could look like. So let me go at a high level through the somewhat technical side of what we're doing behind the scenes, right? The first thing we're doing is processing that application. So you saw that filled out application that I showed right here with all of that information. We need to structure it so that we can update systems and also track that information as well. So we're going to be extracting all of that information and running a quick rules-based check. Now, we've been doing this at UiPath with rule-based checks for a long time, right? So we know the process and we know exactly the structure that you need to do. And this is something that's highly manual. So once we complete that check, we can either facilitate the communication, right, with whoever just applied for this benefit, or we can continue through the process. That 70% that's Pradeep mentioned of straight through processing, while also alleviating the burden of that 30% error handling, right? Exception handling, I should say. So once we do that, we can also extract some other information here and run a few separate agents. Now, these agents that we'll see in a second are going to help us determine the eligibility of this specific application. We're going to connect to various systems and make determinations, right, or suggestions on where someone is living, if they're living in the right place, and if they actually are eligible for the benefits that they're applying for. And these research agents, it's really important to note, are not replacing a caseworker, right? They're doing the admin work so that a caseworker can ultimately make that final determination, right? When we bring it all together here and have that caseworker in the loop to make the ultimate decision. I was on a call recently and someone mentioned the combination of human intelligence with AI, artificial intelligence, right? We're not saying that this is going to replace someone. We're just trying to ingest all that information and give it to them in one place so that they can take some recommendations. But ultimately, it's up to the caseworker who is, highly trained and highly valuable to make that decision. Once they make that decision, we can update records, send out mail as well, trigger any other upstream or downstream systems that need to be updated to ultimately, right, serve our constituents or your constituents well. So now, as I load this in, we'll see this process and it's under review. This is automatically linked to our Maestro link and it'll be live and happening, in real time. I want to mention this actually did happen. You can see the exact timing here. And we have a full audit trail, right? So I mentioned agents. People generally are want to know a little bit more, right? And you can see the exact calls, for example, that we made with agents. Maybe there's multiple calls. We can see the specific tools that the agent used, right, to make that determination. And we track all of that information. Also within UiPath, we're able to have a high security layer as well. So we can do PII masking too, so that we're not just distributing data randomly. But this did run in real time right as I was talking to you all right here. And we can see it went through each step in the process. It took me, let's say, 10 minutes. I tend to be a little verbose. And we were already able to process that application. That was some straight through processing, but we still have that human in the loop. If we needed, we could send out an automated request and get that information back as well. So you can see how much time we are giving back to our caseworkers so that all they have to do is be brought in here and make that determination. So here I can do that actually within our application, right? And I can complete this review. And this is really cool, right? We're meeting our caseworker right where they are. In this case, I am the caseworker, right? But we can see the specific task that's been assigned to me, and I can complete that review. Now, Because this is a demo environment, it might take a little bit of time to load all of this information in. But look, we have our specific recommendations. Is the person eligible? Yes. We have reasoning. We have our benefit calculation. We also have our two specific fraud risk agents that I mentioned, right? So now we're summarizing all of that information in line for a caseworker to ultimately only have to click approve or deny, right? We could add in potentially comments as well if we need to send this back for more information or if we need to have another run through, right? And all of this supporting documentation is in line. So I have my criteria, I have the identification, all of that I mentioned as well. So now once I click approve here, we're going to end the process, right? And we'll be able to go on to the next step, whatever that may be. Issuing, right, that payment, providing that value to our constituents, and that'll update in real time too. So now I just want to talk a little bit about what we did, right? We mentioned a little bit of that eligibility determination, and I want to show you what this agent really looks like. So I'm taking off my caseworker hat, and now I'm in UiPath developer mode, right? We had that entire process that I showed you, and now we're going to double click into one specific task, this eligibility determination agent. And what you're seeing here is a prompt that we do our PII masking for, but send ultimately to an LLM to make a decision. And really, the value that we're adding here is that we're taking away that data layer, right? So we're not just automatically providing it to an LLM. Instead, we may mask that information, we may pull it away, but we can also put in certain data points, right? We're also facilitating the exchange. So we have different tools here as well. I could add in a specific workflow to allow, pardon me, the agent to work as the brain and use RPA, APIs, different agentic processes as their limbs, right? So that when we talk about agents, they can perform a goal-based outcome. For a caseworker, that means the agent is able to reference a policy document even if it changes in a split second, right? So if we have, for example, this eligibility index here, if that's changed, within 2027, for example, it's super easy to make that change. We're not doing any coded changes either. And ultimately, it's not relying on one person within an organization to know the exact codified procedure, right? We're taking that away or out of the caseworker's hands so that they can ultimately focus on their decision. So as we look at this process, right, I ran it once in front of you, but at a high level, we also want to understand what that looks like when we run multiple processes, right? When we're going through and ingesting a lot of information, where is it failing? Maybe where in a specific region do we need to add a little bit more help? And we have this monitoring tab here. So you can see all of the instance information over time. And as I zoom in here, right, to our specific process where we ingested all that information and as a caseworker made an ultimate decision, we have this nice heat map to understand where is it taking a lot of time. And you can see when we request additional information, our constituents are getting back to us really fast, right? Maybe that could be a place for potentially more automation. Similarly, and this makes sense, when we have our caseworker review, it's taking the most amount of time, right, to process this application. And really what that informs, our program head or our department here is maybe we need to review that a little bit more. And we need to provide caseworkers with more information or split this up, right, across various departments. Maybe we're asking caseworkers still to do a little bit more, right? And when, ultimately there are policy changes and other information comes in, we can look at this tab to monitor, and potentially we can also optimize this so that, this is a solution built for the future rather than a band-aid, right? That isn't going to live and grow with you, right? Here we have our different variants, the amount of conformance, our traces, etc., to see, hey, how can we optimize this and build this going forward? So to wrap up, we started right in with this ingestion. As a caseworker, I have all of these different mandates that are coming through, and I'm doing a lot of admin manual work, flipping through a bunch of different systems. We peel back a layer to look at what agentic orchestration, right, and all of that information looks like when we go through and process these benefits applications, pulling in that front door that Pradeep mentioned to extract the data and codify it to make sure that we can make a determination, right? We looked at what an agent looks like to call those tools, have some goal-based decision making, not to replace a caseworker, but to give them that summary so that they can make a determination in a matter of minutes rather than days, right? And then ultimately, we saw what it looks like to have that front door to process all of this in line, right? We have all of that information for us right here as that single pane of glass. I could even ask AI, right, to give me more information around this specific claim. If we needed to have rework, we would track that as well. And we have it down to a really granular level, but we're trying to meet you where you are and ultimately not rip and replace a bunch of systems, but connect to all of them so that the caseworker can focus on what they do best, which is that ultimate determination, validation, and provision of necessary resources for their constituents. So now we'll turn it back to Pradeep to see what this looks like in practice as we implement an architecture.
Cool. Thanks, Sohail. So again, here's what you just saw, right? You saw that end-to-end SNAP application workflow. You saw a blend of RPA and API workflows. You saw high fidelity data extraction from ID documents. You saw AI agents that Sohail just showed you that are able to cross-reference policy. And then you saw like a centralized human in the loop that Sohail described as single pane of glass application. So hopefully that help you visualize the solution end to end, that help you like put all of these moving parts together in one cohesive workflow. So here's what we want to leave you with, right? We talked about the challenges in HHS. We talked about how these challenges are going to get compounded with this new HR1 changes, whether it is work requirement tracking, whether it is 6-month renewal cycles, or whether it is a requirement for doing more automated verification for fraud and integrity analysis. We want to send you a 2-page quick scan assessment for you. It's a really quick tool where you can answer questions that are across these 7 different pillars. From there, we have a couple of recommendations on what you can tackle first, what will give you like that immediate quick win. Right, so here are the next steps that we're asking, right? Please look at this readiness assessment that we're going to send you, fill this out, score your gaps in this assessment document. And then you can request a workshop with us where we'll look at that assessment document with you, and then we'll give you like a roadmap or a blueprint of what you could be doing. And here's a sample of a roadmap, right? So based on the responses you provide, we'll sequence these projects out the right way, and then we'll tell you what your implementation plan looks like. So that is what we had planned for this webinar. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Jody.
Awesome. Thank you, Pradeep and Sohail, for the engaging presentation and demo. I'm going to share my screen really quick. So you'll see our contact information on the screen here. Please feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to connect and share how your software and UiPath can support your team's automation journey. We'll be sending out a follow-up email within the next 24 hours that will include the recording of today's session, so you can revisit the content anytime at your convenience, along with the assessment framework shared during today's webinar. If you're interested in learning more, we'd be happy to schedule a UiPath workshop for you and your team to gain hands-on experience and explore what this could look like in your environment. So keep an eye on your inbox to check out those resources. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so we can go ahead and wrap things up here. Thank you, everybody, for your time. We really appreciate you joining us today, and we hope to see you at a future webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.